Hello, friends. What's up? It is, wow, Sunday, October 1st. Beautiful day. Looks like it's actually going to be a hot, kind of hottish day, especially for this time of the year, and especially for the summer that we've had here in Western New York this year. Something I want to talk to you about today is something that we recently implemented as of this season in our gardens, and that is the use of biochar and the use of worm castings. In the 7 seasons, goodness, yeah, 7 seasons now that I've been working this plot of land, I've really done very minimal amending. You see a lot of people like form their entire beds out of compost and stuff like that. I literally just started working the earth that was here. I had one of the local farmers that's my neighbor bring like a 15-foot tiller or so, maybe 16, small for their scale, but big to me, over. And I had originally had a 30 by 30 plot that I tarped off and killed most of the grass. And he goes, "Get all those tarps out of the way. I'll come till it for you." I was right on the cusp of like low till, no till concepts and delving into them, and like, just the traditional, conventional ways of agriculture. So I was really kind of torn. I didn't know if I wanted him to till it, but also couldn't say no to the opportunity because working all of it by hand is very labor intensive, sometimes very defeating and daunting. And then if you do get into it, sometimes it can be defeating. But anyways, we've done very little amending of these soils. We've really just been working with our native soil, which is quite sad. It's very heavy, lots of sand. Soil structure collapses very easily, especially here with the market garden. He tilled it, and then after that first year, I believe it was I want to say it was spring of either 16 or 17, and we had torrential rains for the weeks after that. And then I was still out here in my muck boots trying to shape up my beds, because I didn't understand soil biology and structure and different things as well as I do now. I'm not saying I'm an expert, nowhere near it, still just scratching the surface, if you will, pun intended. But know a lot more and know that super saturated soil should not be worked because you collapse its structure and you ruin it, making it heavily compacted, prone to compaction, and just make a really nasty soil. And that's what we did with this garden our first year. So we've been amending our mistakes ever since, but not bringing in amendments to do it. So this year we decided, after finding out that one of our local friends from our homeschool network that we're a part of are attempting to get their own soil amendment company off the ground, and that they worked on producing worm castings and biochar, as well as some other minerals, ground rock dust, different things like that. And I'm sure there's others that I'm not aware of or just am ignorant to. But we're like, hey, if we're going to buy it off these friends, the one owner of the company is my son's teacher this year, and the husband's just a super cool dude, and getting to know them, getting to make new friends. So, and he's actually a subscriber to this channel, so shout out to CP. Appreciate you guys so much, your whole family, getting to know you guys and the products that you bring to the table. And so I want to show you their stuff, explain some of the observations I've had from using their biochar and their worm castings, and the blend that I created using those, and my assessment on how it's done. So let's check it out. All right, so right here is all of our stuff. This is a garden bed that just got some top dressing with all this. So first off, we could see their logo, and you might see that I did a short doing a shout out to them before, but they're Regenerative Soil Amendments, and their links are going to be down in the description. They just got their stuff up on Amazon. They're based right here in Western New York, about 20 minutes from me. And I'm also going to put their Amazon link on there to their biochar. This obviously says worm castings. The bucket has biochar in it. Beautiful stuff. Absolutely beautiful. This is still unactivated, non-charged, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to experiment this winter, probably with layering this with comfrey leaves and some other stuff. I'm going to try a couple different things. About half the bucket's going to go toward being charged with comfrey, layered in other buckets. And then I think I'll use the other half of the bucket to do some charging with maybe chicken manure or bunny manure or both, maybe even horse manure. My neighbors to the north of me have horses, so that's an option as well. And bunny manure I can get from my cousin who lives about 10-15 minutes away and does a lot of homesteading practices too. Speaking of his bunny manure, I'll show you some of that in a minute and how we've been using it. But this is their worm castings, some that I have left over. I think I bought, I can't remember, it was 5 or 6 5-gallon buckets of worm castings off of them. And a lot of our beds got amended with it. We tilled more this year than we ever have. And another thing I want to notate while I'm here that I missed in last weekend's video is I never really got to our garden fails, and we've had a lot of them, and our garden didn't fail. We failed our garden is what it is. And it is what it is, and accepting that is how you move on. So here's some beds that are very feral. I just untarped them probably 3 weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago. They were as feral and weedy as this path and this old snap pea bed and whatnot here. But as you can see, we haven't done nearly as much weeding as we have in the past. And we found that, even though we bought a tiller, which has made our life a lot easier in working the gardens, getting them prepped in the spring, we noticed that our perennial seed pressure, which is something we should have known. This is why we were originally getting into the concepts of low-till and no-till. But we felt and saw how easy it was to use our cultivator, and we did it, and seeing the seed pressure return, because it's been pretty well the last couple of years, just seeing that heavy perennial seed pressure come back. And since we were tilling beds deeper and more than we ever have, we also saw a lot of new perennial seeds pop up that we aren't really familiar with. I mean, not that we've never seen them in this area, but we just didn't see them in our seed bank, in our soil before this year. But even just negligence, like this was my hardneck garlic bed this year. You could tell because it had the most recent mulch up of straw still pretty present on top. I've never tarped it. If I would have tarped it right away after, we would see that a lot of this perennial weed pressure that's coming through our thicket now wouldn't be here, and hopefully the worms would be working on taking that straw down lower into the soil structure, breaking it down, while also that plastic kind of putting the pause button on the soil, if you will. But anyways, let's look at how we amended up this bed here. This is going to be our soft neck garlic. It was in this bed here, which, like you could see, there's still the straw present on the soil, on the top. But if we could get back some ways, we'll probably see. Maybe not. Maybe it hasn't been present. It's not breaking down enough quite yet. But there should be worms coming up and getting this, taking it back down, chewing it up, pooping it out, making worm castings of our own. But anyways, back to topic at hand. Here's our current bed where the soft neck will be going back in, and I've given it a nice dusting. You can see chunks of biochar everywhere, and you can also see this nice light dusting on the top that is bunny poop. And again, you can see a bunch of the chunks of biochar. Just a nice dusting over the top. Should we be adding a lot more with how sad our soil structure can be? I mean, look at some of this clumping and just heaviness of our soil. It does not have the best structure to it. So we probably should be adding heaps and heaps of compost in these amendments. Financially, it's just not plausible, and it's not sustainable to be adding that many amendments in at once. We are messing with our own compost creation systems, but we're still getting there. We're still figuring it out, and we're still finding the time for it too. So here's the very little amount that's left of our mix, and this is a blend of their biochar, their worm castings, and ground up bunny poop from my cousin there that I told you all about. And we found this to be a really, really good blend. And then I probably put about 15 to 20% of our native soil, just a couple spade shovels worth, in there as well to try to inoculate it. So that does have some of our native soil in it. And that's kind of a thing with like jadam and things like that, Korean natural farming, kind of putting a little bit, inoculating it with your native soil, your native microbes and things. Again, not an expert on these things. I don't get into Korean farming and jadam that much. I just know that that's something they do in that practice. I've looked into it a bit, but I just stick with what I know, and I try not to get overwhelmed with all the stuff that there is out there, because there's a lot, man. There's a lot of things you could do in your gardens. There's, from all, get out of the bed. Thank you. Gotta keep these puppies in check. I mean, for instance, look, this never really evolved. I had done in my market garden tour earlier this year, I showed y'all how we plant our tomatoes, and it's been a relatively sad year. We're still getting a bunch out of there. I haven't been tying it up. We've been using the Florida weave method for quite some years. I think I'm done with it. It's just too labor intensive. You got to stay up on it. I mean, this isn't the right string for it either. This is just a roll of mason line that I had left over from just work. And it's not strong enough to do with this. Not like the baling twine I was using before, which is expensive and full of synthetic materials. Granted, I could use a jute or a hemp twine or something, but I really think this, I'm over this methodology, and I'm just going to start staking each tomato plant individually like most people do. But that will be an experiment for the greenhouse, hopefully, for next year, and hopefully our tomatoes will be out of the market garden in general. But as you can see, again, just let this go. It didn't evolve as good as we wanted to. The dog comes in and eats tomatoes and leaves half-rotten ones on the vine. You're a stinker. Get out of here. Beat it. We got basil in here. We got lima beans. Lots of lima beans. I usually set an extra line that kind of stretches out around the outer edge of the bed, about 5 inches in from the edge, and keeps them all just kind of upright and off the ground. I never got that put in. It's just been a busy year. You spend 4 years as a stay-at-home dad and full-time gardener. You really kind of overlook how much time you have and how much you can get done when you have those circumstances in your favor. And now that I'm back to working full-time, running my own business is on the side, and trying to keep up with our homesteading efforts, it's just been crazy. But even though these systems are feral and crazy and a bit out of whack, and maybe the bugs and the birds and other critters have been getting more of our stuff than us, that's especially apparent over in here. I mean, look at the wildwood is still just pumping out elderberry heads. A lot of them, though. I don't know if you can see that. Look at how buggy that is when I shake them. we haven't been able to keep the small, like, gnat fruit flies off the elderberries. But look at how much is still in here. And I just stayed up till midnight the other night doing an elderberry wild grape jelly from a batch I picked a couple days ago. And again, indeterminate. It's going to keep putting flowers out. Wildwood elderberry, an indeterminate elderberry, going to continue to put heads out and flowers until it frost kills. So this is a beautiful plant. If you like to make your own teas and other things that are great to make with these flowers, all sorts of things you can do with them. They're so intoxicating. The smell from them is wonderful. This is a really good variety for flower collection and production because it's going to keep putting these heads out. If I was actively cutting a lot of these back, it would keep pumping new blossoms out. Show you some other stuff that's gone quite feral on us. Let's go take a short walk. I don't want to make this video too long. Look how beautiful this tomato is. I'm going to slice one of these up and I'm going to make a tomato sandwich for lunch today. Maybe try to find some basil leaves that aren't too nasty and bitter. That's one of my favorite things. Some mayo, some of these Finger Lakes long paste. It's a locally produced paste tomato, specifically meant for the northeast of the U.S., especially western and central New York. Let's look how feral our Three Sisters garden went this year, also known as Hazel Hill. I haven't been able to keep up with any of it, but it's still productive. We pulled so much popping corn, which is what you see here. Again, so much of it is rotting. I mean, that's straight up like a soft corn head, and there's ants and bugs coming out when I squeeze it. Quit chasing the chickens! We have our cannellini beans, Haudenosaunee skunk beans, still putting out beans. I don't hardly see any pods on this one. But if we come over in here, we see a bunch. And then this one isn't corn, but this is actually sorghum, to where we would harvest these heads. And they're just about there. They're just losing the last of their green tinge and really starting to go golden brown. That's when you want them. And then it's a race to see who gets them first, you or the birds, because they love them just as much. This is a variety of sorghum that's popping sorghum. So we're really big fans of our popcorn. We have a kettle-style popcorn maker. We like to make it the old school way, no microwave. We don't own a microwave. Not fans of microwaving food. I think it ruins your food and ruins your guts at the same time. But I digress. And we really like our popping corn. So you can pop this sorghum like popcorn. Look at how full this head is. That's a monster. Get off of there, Mr. Fly. And you can pop this, and they're really tiny. I mean, like, after they pop, they're like the size of not much larger than a popcorn kernel before it pops. But just sweet and nutty and delicious, and just all sorts of random things going to seed. A lot of our arugula going to seed. A lot of our squash. This had watermelon, I believe, or maybe squash in it. That the arugula was a cover crop to get started, establish a cover on the soil of the mound before or while the watermelon was able to grow, and try to just not give the perennial weeds a chance. Try to establish a root in the soil with things we want, like cover cropping, but with other edible things, and then pulling them out after. But a lot of our squash rotted in here. We had serious flooding. We had such a wet summer this year. They kept trying to push that whole drought narrative, and then it just couldn't hold up after we were all flooded out for several weeks. This is a ditch that runs along it, and literally from about the cluster of black walnuts around almost up to the soft maple here across my yard, the whole bottom of my apple guild, which is right here, In this whole side yard, because this is kind of a flood basin or a floodplain, if you will. There's a ditch all right through here that actually has huge drain pipe that runs out into the farmer's field, cuts a 45 about halfway between here and the woods, and connects to the bigger farmers, bigger fields that are all along this stretch here. And all of that has drain tile through it, and that's a main that comes down through, and they actually put it right on my land while we were in the hospital with our kid being born, our second child being born about 2 years ago. It's actually somewhere like right in here, and my property doesn't end until well over here, actually. Last I checked, my property line was actually like, I think it was 5 rows out into the farmer field. Last time I used my maps. So have your maps, know your property lines, because it blew my mind when I realized how much more I owned than I thought. You know, at first we just went on what was mowed when we moved in, all that kind of jazz, and it turns out we had like, I think it was like 15 or 20 feet this way, 30 more feet this way, and then I think it was another like 15, 20, maybe even more off the other side of the property. So we've been working on reclaiming these areas, turning them into gardens, and also the forest gardens to kind of perimeter our property out. But anyways, back to feral gardens. Even though these gardens are super feral, and all the flooding that occurred took out all our squash. I mean, most of it, you can see our rotting butternut there. I came in the other day, got almost all the squash I could find that was worthwhile out. We've had cherry tomatoes that we grew last year out here that have just taken over, gone feral. They're a golden variety, so I'm going to try to get as many of these golden ripe pods out of here, because they really are. I mean, they're so buggy, though. It's almost not worth it. So I might try to cut a bunch back, find some decent ones. There's a variety called Coyote. Amazing cherry tomatoes. But I can't keep up with them. Talk about feral. But just because something's feral, and you might have failed it as far as what you wanted it to be. I mean, look at how productive of a system this still is. These aren't cracked, I'll eat them. Because if they're cracked, they probably got flies in them. Amazing. And look how vigorous. They're everywhere. You just see these little golden globes. The true golden globes, not those fake actors and actresses that give themselves and their friends awards for nonsense. Whoop. There's still abundance all around us, friends. Even when it's not necessarily the way we'd want it to be. Because this place is a mess. I mean, it's so buggy in here. It's worse than over by the elderberries. We didn't get a single watermelon. They all rotted from the flooding. Turns out winter squash really does not like, and melons do not like flooding. They do not like wet feet. So we plan to come in here, maybe deepen this ditch, and take a lot of our ejected material. We're going to be using it to build this area up, doing other things, because we just lost control. And with the flooding, we couldn't mow. It was hard to get out here and weed. But I mean, even our hazelnuts really hated the flooding. They're actually doing really good with it for a while. I actually think the reason this one's barren is because we had so much flooding this summer. We seen something we'd never seen before here on our property, which was crop dusting. They were paying a guy to crop dust all these fields. And don't get me wrong, I love my farmers and everything, but I don't like crop dusting. I think it's irresponsible. I think it's bad practice, and I think it's just too unpredictable and uncontrollable to effectively use and do. Oh, the mama's hanging out up here with the babes. And I think the crop dusting and the adjacency to the being right on the edge of the field, because they have overspray, like to think they don't is silly. My vehicle's parked up over here in line with the home, and it looked like somebody had hit it with white spray paint overspray, and it took about 2 weeks of rain to get it off. Talking to the other farmers in the area, they actually use waxes, which are probably petroleum based, to make it stick to the plants so that it doesn't come off with the first rain. So it's like, this is nasty stuff, and we don't want it anywhere near our house. It really made us think about if this was the place we wanted to continue to stay too. But look at, it's just ever since they did it, my hazelnuts have been slowly dying, and they were actually all thriving quite well. This is supposed to be a path too, to be able to walk this whole area. And again, we're coming back over into that cherry tomato territory where they have completely taken the hill in the path. And I wanted to show you one of the few that we do have that's okay, and it's the furthest one from the spraying. Still has some issues down here, not looking the happiest. I know some of it is insect pressure because there's so many bugs for these cherry tomatoes. It's kind of insane. So, yeah. To elaborate on gardens getting out of control and us failing them, I think I've showed you a majority of it. I mean, even up here, I mean, look at under the apple guild. I mean, they're still putting out crazy amount of apples, but because we didn't keep it nice underneath, I mean, this one's a beautiful one. I'm going to take that. That's not a hole to the inside, that's a scab. I don't mind eating that. I wouldn't preserve it or store it, but you'll eat it, or I will. But a lot of these other ones you see will have holes, other things. If we kept this a lot cleaner, and we're going to get better at keeping the apples off the ground, the nasty ones that are fallen and bug infested, fallen prematurely, getting those up is very important. Getting them out is very important. Those bugs are going to then nest and multiply and all that stuff underneath them, sprout in the spring, and haunt you again. Again, look at a calendula bed. I haven't gotten in here to harvest seed at all. Look at all these dry heads. Look at all of it growing in the path because I haven't harvested any. Look at my perennial seed pressure in the path coming back. Just, you're not always going to keep up. We had red potatoes in here. Decent little harvest. Nothing crazy. Kind of got away from us. Again, in this bed, all these peppers sprouted from wild seed that was in the soil. All the ones that I tried to plant didn't take. Had a real bad year with peppers this year. Strawberry beds are okay, super weedy. Same with the blackberries, just everywhere. You know, don't let it get you down though. You know, I'm not hiding from my gardens. I'm not turning them all back into yard. Even though it's difficult and sometimes depressing, you know, just like Curtis Stone had said in his live stream yesterday, you just got to, you know, drop your head and just keep going. You know, you can't let it get you down. Everyone's kind of burning out this time of year. He admits he burns out this time of year. You know, you just want to be done. You want to put the gardens to sleep. You want to eat all your canned goods and other things you